This is the plaintiff, Brandy Walton. She says she rented a mobile trailer on a rent-to-own agreement with the defendant, and he turned around and went back on his word and evicted her. She incurred $150 in attorney's fees, which she doesn't feel she should pay for, and is suing the defendant for the return of the money she says he owes her. This is the defendant, Carmen. He says the plaintiff fell behind in her rent, and he had to hire an attorney to post an eviction notice on her door. The lease clearly states this is a tenant's responsibility. He thinks the judge will concur and therefore owes nothing. He's accused of ticking off a tenant. The defendant has filed a countersuit for $969.91 for unpaid taxes.
All parties, please raise your right hands.
Welcome back to the People's Court. Next case on the docket. The plaintiff is suing the defendant for attorney's fees because she says the defendant illegally evicted her. But the defendant says the plaintiff fell behind on her rent and he had to hire someone to serve her the eviction notice. It's the case of get out of town.
Thank you, Douglas.
You're welcome.
All right, Ms. Walton, you are suing Mr. Carmen for $150. Attorney's fees that you don't think you should have to pay for. He's counterclaiming you now, $969.91 in tax charges and municipal fees that you were supposed to pay, according to him, and didn't. Let me hear from you first, Ms. Walton. What's going on?
It started out that I found the mobile home on a friend's page on Facebook.
Okay, so you contact him and you agree on a price?
Yes, ma'am.
And the idea was what? You would rent to own?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, you agree to a price, and what's the price?
The price was that I was supposed to pay him $450 a month, and that was what I was paying him to own the place, and that was including the lot rent.
Okay, and then when would you stop paying that? Like, in other words, what was the purchase price of the item?
The purchase price was $10,000.
Okay. Who set the monthly amount, him or you?
He did.
Okay. All right. And then what happens?
And as it was coming to the end of when the lease was supposed to be up.
Which was how long after you moved in there?
2 years.
Okay, go on.
So shortly before the lease was supposed to be up, he told me, he says, well, I will have another contract set up and we can make another payment agreement and have it continued for another year.
Okay.
So he sent me what was supposed to be the agreement by text. He was supposed to go to the person that owns the lot. It was an attorney. He was supposed to send the paperwork to him, and then we were supposed to get together so I could sign the paperwork and take it from there and finish off paying.
And what happened?
That never happened.
He never gave you the paperwork?
No, ma'am.
What did he do?
It was August 13th of last year. I was at work. I came home from work, and there was a notice to evict.
All right. So what happens, Mr. Carmen, when you guys sit down to do the math ends up being $3,000 shy?
Yeah, that's correct, ma'am.
Well, why is that her fault, though? What's the idea here? You know, if you guys agree on a monthly rent and when you multiply that, it's shy of the $10,000, how do you get to deprive her of a chance to buy the place?
Okay, so in 2019, we entered into an agreement where the lease stated that the length of the lease was only for 2 years. And furthermore, we agreed that payments would be made and the place would be paid off within the 2 years.
The math does work out, because if I multiply 450 times 24 months, that equals $10,800. And according to you, she put down $2,000. So why was she behind by $3,000? That's what I'm trying to understand, Mr. Carmen. Did she miss payments?
No, it wasn't a payment thing. There was two different entities. She was paying me $150 a month, and there's another landlord who owns all this land, and he was getting the lion's share, which would be $300.
Okay, but she would pay you and you would pay them for the rental because you're subletting it to her, correct?
Correct.
All right, so then it's not that she's paying them, it's that you did the math wrong, because if I just take 150 and I multiply it by 24, she would never be done. All right, so now let's, even with the $2,000 deposit, she would still be several $1,000s shy. So now there's an agreement that you'll extend the lease beyond the 2 years in order to give her a chance to buy the place. What happened? According to her, you never provided her with that. Instead, you smacked an eviction notice.
We made a verbal agreement for an amount that would terminate before the end of 2021. And when she paid me the next rent, it wasn't the agreement, the amount we agreed on.
What was the amount, according to you, that you agreed on?
I don't know it right offhand, but at that time when I did the math, it would have terminated by December of 2021.
Did it increase her payment?
Yes, it did, yeah.
By how much, Ms. Walton, would it have increased your payment?
I was to pay $275 a month.
Extra.
That in total, $275 each month.
I'm sorry, you were already paying $450 a month, so why would it go down when you're short to buy it?
I, at that point, was now paying the lot rent directly to the office and making him the regular payments.
Okay, so you were paying the office of $350.
Yes, ma'am.
And then you were paying him $275 instead of $150.
Yes, ma'am.
She failed to pay me the $275.
How much did she pay you instead of $275?
$150.
Okay, now, Ms. Walton, how much did you pay him in August?
In August, I paid him $300.
Okay, so then according to you, you're not only complying, you're ahead of the game because he says you're supposed to give him $275, and according to you, you gave him $300, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, prove you gave him $300. Because he says you gave him $150.
I'd have to go back through my text messages because I told him I had paid him the $300, and he said that's not how I wanted it or something.
Here's your text to her in July, Mr. Carmen. The new rent-to-own lease will be $275 per month as agreed, starting August 1st. She says, I'm paying you the $275 like you asked for. Actually, I'm doing $300. I'm not sure what that letter was about. I thought we had this straightened out. I'm trying to get that paid as fast as I can. And then all of a sudden, you're like, $3,195, or you have 29 days to vacate. What happened in there? Because all the texts show that she's paying you the $275. Did she not pay you the $275?
It never followed through, Judge.
Okay, that's what I need you to prove. I don't want to see texts where you claim what you're going to do. I want to see what you did. Show me the proof that you paid the $275.
Yes, ma'am. I have the receipts. I don't have the receipt in front of me right now.
Well, now's the time that it'd be really nice to prove that, because you're in the middle of the trial and you're the plaintiff. You decide how fast to go to court. Did she pay $150 or did she just pay nothing, Mr. Carmen, or you just don't remember?
She paid $150.
And you have no proof that you paid what you were supposed to pay. So maybe now we have the answer to why an eviction notice was slapped on there. So now the eviction notice is slapped on there, and then the two of you negotiate, correct? Is there an attorney involved in the negotiations, Mr. Carmen?
There is an attorney involved, and I paid a fee for him to have some. I got counseling from this attorney, and he told me what I ought to do is put an eviction notice on the door. I said I'd never done that, and he said I'll write it up for you, place it on the door, take a picture of it, date it, and it worked. She finally paid the mobile home off, and it was a great deal.
How did you get the rest of the money to pay him off, Ms. Walton?
I worked overtime. I borrowed money from family to get everything paid off. I just did everything I had to do.
In this negotiation now that happens with the attorney, do you agree with Mr. Carmen that you're going to pay the $150 of the attorney fee?
The only way that I was able to get the new contract, the new agreement, was I had to agree to pay $150.
So you agree to pay it, and then you pay it, and now you're going to court to sue for it, something that you agreed as part of a settlement that you would pay. What do you think is the point of a settlement? Do you understand how when you reach an agreement with somebody, a settlement outside of court, that is binding? It's not just binding on him. Because, frankly, if you didn't pay the agreed-upon amount and he slapped an eviction notice, he could just take the whole thing from you and proceed with the eviction. He gave up something of value to him. What he gave up of value was the mobile home. And you gave up something of value. You paid $150 and hustled to pay off the mobile home, right? You both give up something of value in order to get this done. And then now you're coming and saying, give me back what I gave of value. How do you figure? And now you have opened up a can of worms, haven't you? Because you have a counterclaim against her now, Mr. Carmen, for what?
For $969.91, ma'am.
And what does that represent?
That represents the taxes she has paid in 2019, 2020, and 2021.
The taxes she had to pay.
She had to pay.
And she didn't pay.
Correct.
Because in the lease, you're supposed to pay the taxes. Did you know that and realize that, Ms. Walton? It's right in the lease.
Welcome back to the People's Court. So the burning question, was the letter of the law followed? And if so, who wins and who loses? Let's go back into the courtroom and find out.
When he talked to me, he said all I paid was the $450.
Okay, let's look at the lease you signed. I didn't sign it. You signed it. Let's look at it. Leasee further covenants and agrees as follows. The leasee, that's you, shall pay all real estate taxes assessed with respect to the leased property throughout the term of this lease. What does that mean to you?
Okay, I did not receive any receipts to say how much I had to pay.
Mr. Carmen, why didn't you forward it to her throughout that period of time?
That was a mistake on my part, Your Honor.
I'll say there's numerous mistakes on your part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now, let me ask you a question. You and she settle. And what's good for the goose, why isn't it good for the gander? Why didn't you bring up any of these taxes at the time of the settlement?
I forgave her at the time. I thought she got a great deal, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms.
Look, courts have an interest in parties coming to settlements because if not, we get inundated. We don't want to drown in cases and then not be able to give each case the time and attention it deserves. So we encourage and respect settlements even when you guys don't. So if I'm looking at her and saying, don't be ridiculous, why would I order that $150 to be paid back to you? You agreed on that settlement. Why wouldn't I say the same thing to you, which is, don't be ridiculous. You never billed her for it, you never collected it, and you settled it out of court. And she ponied up the money and everything. You never brought this up then. And so why shouldn't I hold your feet to the fire as much as I'm holding hers? That's my question to you, Mr. Carmen.
The only reason you shouldn't is, I mean, she failed numerous things. She didn't even keep insurance, and it became a liability at the time. I had to have this lease fulfilled.
I understand everything you're saying, but that doesn't answer my question, does it? How many times she violated or didn't come through or whatever is completely irrelevant when you and the lawyer and her hammer it out and settle the case. And it was really a rhetorical question, so I'll answer it myself. The answer is no, Ms. Walton, you don't get the $150 back because I respect the settlement. And no, Mr. Carmen, even though I see that you were more than fair with her and that you gave her lots of time and that you were considerate, no, you don't get that because this never came up ever in the settlement, even though, because you're not doing the math right and you're not submitting to her the bills because you forgot what the lease said. No, when you guys all sit down, that's the time to ask for your demands. And if you settle without that, then you say it's like a new contract, what happened that day. And I am respecting the new contract, which supersedes the old contracts. On your claim against him, a big 0. And on your claim against her, 0 as well.
We're taking a break, and when we come back, Judge Millian will impart wisdom in her chambers with her husband, John, and Doug's going to be in the hallway with the litigants.
Does someone owe you money and you can't get them to pay you back? Well, contact us at peoplescourt.com and hit submit your case.